Boston is living a season full of questions, adjustments, and pressure, and at the center of everything is Brad Stevens. Entering the year surrounded by uncertainty, the Celtics have reached the 26th game with a record that forces a serious discussion. 15 wins, 11 losses, 4th place in a crowded Eastern Conference. All of that without Jayson Tatum on the floor, still rehabbing his Achilles. This is not noise, this is context, and it creates a dilemma that cannot be ignored. Before we go deeper, if you want to stay ahead of everything involving the Celtics, leave your like right now, subscribe to the channel, and click the hype button. That support keeps this coverage sharp, fast, and always on time. Now, here is where the tension really begins. The Celtics are good enough to compete today, that is clear. They defend, they develop players, and they stay competitive even when key pieces are missing. But February's trade deadline is approaching fast, and Stevens has to decide how far this group can really go without sacrificing the future. He made it clear in his own words, there is no ceiling being placed on this team, but every move has to make sense, be a good deal, and align with the long-term vision of competing for what truly matters. On the court, the signs are mixed in a way that makes decisions harder, not easier. Neemias Queta has emerged as a legitimate starter, while small lineups with Josh Minott have kept the team flexible. That flexibility works, but the lack of a true backup big is obvious in certain matchups. At the same time, the young wings have delivered. Jordan Walsh's defense and energy stand out. Minott, Hugo Gonzalez, and Baylor Shireman have all taken advantage of real minutes. Player development is not theory here, it is happening in real time. This is where the mental pressure on Stevens intensifies. The front office has a strong track record. Peyton Pritchard and Sam Hauser developed internally. Derek White was added through a smart trade. But trades are easy to discuss and extremely hard to execute. They require alignment, timing, and financial clarity. And finances matter more than ever. The second apron of the salary cap is not forgiving. Last summer proved that, with Drew Holiday, Kristaps Porzingis, Al Horford, and Luke Kornet all gone. Right now, the Celtics sit roughly $12 million above the luxury tax line. That reality alone can force difficult choices. Cutting costs is always on the table, especially in a season where the team is competitive but not fully loaded. Here is the core issue. When Tatum returns and lines up again with Jaylen Brown, the Celtics instantly look like a real threat in the East. Stevens knows that. But he also knows that rushing a move, or protecting assets too much, could define not just this season, but several seasons ahead. Growth is visible, progress is real, but the margin between confidence and regret is thin. So the question hangs in the air as February approaches, louder with every win and every loss. Does Brad Stevens push his chips in now, trusting that this group is closer than it looks, or does he hold firm, protect the future, and risk letting a real opportunity slip away? The league is paying attention to what the Celtics are doing, and not just because of the wins. With 18 victories and 11 losses, 3rd place in the Eastern Conference, and a 3-game winning streak capped by a 20-point comeback against Indiana, Boston has shifted the conversation. This was supposed to be a bridge season. Jayson Tatum is still out. Expectations were controlled. But results have forced a different level of urgency inside the front office. The Celtics are not drifting, they are competing. And that changes how every phone call before the trade deadline is evaluated. The on-court success has created a delicate scenario. Boston is winning with balance, defensive structure, and depth, not with desperation moves. That gives Brad Stevens room to breathe, but it also raises a critical question. How do you protect the future without disrupting something that is clearly working right now? This is where the proposed trade involving Kyle Anderson quietly enters the picture. Not as a headline-grabbing splash, but as a calculated adjustment with real consequences. The discussion is not about fixing a weakness or chasing a star. It is about structure, timing, and financial control. Anthony Simons has not been placed in trade talks because of poor performance. His role has been stable. The Celtics' success has not depended on replacing him. His name surfaces because of contract logic and long-term alignment. Boston is navigating a season that sits between cycles. At the same time, the second apron and repeater tax penalties loom large. Simons represents one of the few contracts that can be moved without touching the core or altering the identity of the team. According to a trade framework discussed around the league, the Celtics could be involved in a 3-team deal with Utah and Phoenix. In that structure, Boston would send Simons out and receive Kyle Anderson and Nick Richards. Two veterans, defensive versatility, positional flexibility, and most importantly, reduced salary commitment. The numbers matter. This move would shed roughly $15.8 million, pushing the Celtics below the luxury tax line. That is not cosmetic, that is strategic. Anderson's contract gives Boston a functional mid-level salary slot without locking in long-term money. It creates options instead of limitations. Utah would absorb Simons and draft compensation as part of a broader reset, while Phoenix adjusts around its own margins. For Boston, the appeal is subtle but powerful. Depth stays intact, defense improves, financial breathing room is restored. And here is the tension. The Celtics' strong start has not changed their long-term plan. There is no sign of chasing short-term upgrades just because the standings look good. The roster has earned patience. That patience allows Stevens to evaluate rather than react. But the deadline is approaching. Other teams are reassessing. Windows open quickly and close faster. This proposed swap for Kyle Anderson is not about urgency. It is about awareness. It reflects a front office that understands exactly where it stands, competitive now, but building towards something bigger once Tatum is fully back. So the pressure builds quietly. Does Boston make a disciplined move that protects flexibility and still supports this unexpected run, or do they hold everything steady and risk missing the exact moment where control turns into advantage? With the Celtics winning, the margin for error shrinking, and the deadline getting closer, the real question is simple and unavoidable. Is this the move that defines how serious Boston is about balancing the present without compromising the future? What is happening right now with the Celtics demands attention. This season was never supposed to look like this. When Jayson Tatum went down with an Achilles injury last postseason, the expectation was clear. A transitional year, salary control, patience, quiet evaluation. That plan existed before the first tip-off, written lightly, flexible, cautious, but reality has rewritten it fast. After the win against Miami, the Celtics sit fourth in the Eastern Conference. Just half a game from third place to end a half games from second. That is not accidental, that is sustained performance. Jaylen Brown has taken control, averaging over 29 points per game. Derek White has been steady and reliable. Peyton Pritchard continues to deliver in big moments, no longer flying under the radar. And internally, players like Neemias Queta and Jordan Walsh have forced their way into real roles with production, efficiency, and defensive impact. Momentum matters, and this momentum has quietly changed the tone inside the front office. There is also the variable no one expected to seriously discuss at this point. Jayson Tatum is progressing. Brad Stevens has been clear about caution, but the message is just as clear. Tatum wants back, he is meeting benchmarks, he is involved. And if he returns this season, the entire evaluation of this roster changes instantly. That is where urgency begins to creep in. The Celtics' biggest limitation remains size and scoring from the center position. Queta has exceeded expectations, but asking him to anchor a playoff front court is a different level of pressure. This is where the name Nikola Vucevic enters the conversation, not as fantasy, not as a headline grab, but as a logical response to circumstances that no longer match the original plan. Vucevic is 35 years old. Chicago is stuck. A play-in level team with younger priorities. Their future is not built around him. His numbers remain solid. Over 16 points per game, over 9 rebounds. A legitimate offensive option who can finish games and stretch defenses. And importantly, his situation aligns with what Boston needs now. He is on an expiring contract. He earns just over $21 million this season. Chicago would not demand a massive return. Multiple second-round picks, a young forward like Josh Minott. That is the type of framework being discussed. Short-term commitment, no long-term damage, immediate impact. This is not about chasing a title recklessly, it is about recognizing opportunity. If Tatum returns, even late, the Celtics with Vucevic suddenly have spacing, experience, and another reliable scoring threat in playoff basketball. A piece that stabilizes rotations and relieves pressure from Brown and White. The deadline is approaching. Chicago is slipping. Boston is rising. The timing is uncomfortable, but unavoidable. So the question becomes sharper with every win and every rehab update. Does Brad Stevens stick to the original blueprint and let this moment pass, or does he act, knowing that Nikola Vucevic might be the one move that turns a respectable season into something far more dangerous? If you want to stay ahead of every development like this involving the Celtics, make sure to leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and click the hype button right now. Because if this move happens, it changes everything.